Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. Things have been pretty busy recently, but today I thought I would colour up this really cute bunny image from Rochelle and Miller stamps. I've printed it out on my regular printer on some Transitite Perfect colouring paper, which is one of my favourites for alcohol marker colouring. And I've just grabbed my Copic colour chart from Ram Stamps as well, because that will help me figure out what colours to use on my image. I'm looking to keep it to quite nice pastel shades today, so I can tie the bunny in with the lovely digital papers that are in the same release as this. So I've got a nice duck egg blue background paper, and I'd like to do some nice soft colours with the bunny to coordinate with that. So I'm starting out here with my E35 Copic marker, and I'm going into the places on the image where you would expect to see most shadows if this image was 3D and in real life. So I am concentrating on the areas towards the back of the head, assuming that the sun is coming in from the front and the bunny is kind of cycling towards a light source. So the darker areas would obviously be towards the back. So I'm starting out there, and then I am blending it out with an E33 marker, which is slightly lighter than the E35. And to get a nice smooth blend, what you need to do is just make sure that you've got a bit of overlap between one shade and the next shade along. So however you want to do that, whether you kind of flick the colour outwards, whether you just go over the lines, smudge them together, whatever works for you is absolutely fine. But what you want to do is make sure that you do have that bit of overlap, and that creates the kind of in-between colour between your dark and your mid-tone, or your mid-tone and your lighter tone, that gets that nice blend. So after my E33, I've moved into, I think it's E51. That's a lighter shade than I would normally go to after the E33, but the colours that I would normally reach for need refilling, and I think today I was feeling a bit lazy and I didn't want to take the time to refill those markers. So instead, what you've seen me doing is the tip to tip technique. So if you press the top of your lighter shade just into the top of the slightly darker shade of your Copic markers, some of that darker colour will transfer onto the tip of the lighter marker. And then when you apply that colour to the page, it will go on slightly darker, and it will help you just get that more effortless blend. So I've done that for the transition from the E33 to the E51, and then I've moved just into E51 on its own, on the lightest part of the bunny's face, which would be facing the sun. And I've coloured my chicks in Y26, Y23, and I forget the lighter shade. Was it YR00? I'll list all the colours below. And that's because I didn't want really bright yellow chicks. I'm looking for some more kind of muted shades. And that's a really nice kind of soft, almost straw-like yellow as opposed to a very bright yellow. And then I'm moving on to the bunny's straw basket. And when you've got a round object to colour with Copic markers, I find a good way to give it that round spherical look is to make sure that you're not blending so that all of your colouring stops in a straight line. You want to try and kind of curve it round a little, so that it's maybe your lines are slightly longer on the top and then they come in a little bit towards the sides and then they go longer again towards the bottom, so you've got that arch on both sides, and that just helps give the impression of a rounder object. Now I've picked some nice blue-green colours to colour my image to go with the background. The problem is my darkest blue-green marker seems to be a little bit too juicy. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get the excess colour off onto my sheet of paper before I apply it to the image, because the last thing I want is for it to kind of blob out onto my image. But guess what happens? Exactly that, what I was trying to avoid. So at this point, I'm thinking, do I start again? Or do I try and rescue this somehow? And I decided that, no, you know what, I've spent too long colouring the image so far and I actually really like how it's looking. I'm not going to scrap this, I'm going to try and save it. So this is top tip, how to save your images when your Copic marker has blobbed on them. The first thing that I've done is try to get up any excess ink with a dry piece of tissue. The next thing that I've done is gone in with my colourless blender and just gone over the whole area to just try and get rid of as much of that colour as I possibly can. So I'm going to give that a little minute to dry and carry on colouring my bike frame in the rest of the blue-green colours. And then I'm going to come back to that area with my heat gun because I'm a little bit impatient and I don't want to wait for ages for it to dry on its own. So I'm just putting that on the lowest setting to make sure that I'm not warping my image. And I'm just taking the worst out of it there with the heat gun. So step 3 of removing the excess Copic marker is to grab my jelly roll pen. I use a number 8 jelly roll pen. I actually find these are much better than other white gel pens, which can clog up a little bit and not go on particularly evenly. So this is the one that I use all the time. So all I'm doing is I'm tracing around the edges of the bike frame so that any background area is now white. And that's actually hidden most of that mistake. But really all I need to do is make sure that I've got rid of enough of that colour that when I fussy cut it later, it's not going to stick out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to carry on colouring the image now. I'm using my blue-green shades to do the eggs. And then I'm just using the Copic swatch chart that I showed you earlier to help pick out the colours for the rest of the bunny. I'd really highly recommend it. It's actually a free resource on Rochelle's website, so you can download it for free today. And there are versions for Copic markers, Ohuhu, or basically whatever brand that you've got. And it's probably one of the most helpful things that I've ever done in my craft room is to swatch out all of my my markers and my inks, so they're a really good visual resource there. So now I'm colouring in the tyres on the bike and I'm doing them in E40 shades, which are fairly light, and unfortunately they're not enough to hide the remaining ink from the Copic splodge that was left earlier. So my last little tip or trick to share with you today is, if all else fails, just do a little editing of your image. I've grabbed a black fine liner and drawn some mud guards onto the bike wheels. So sorry, Rochelle, for editing your image a little bit there, but needs must. And then I've coloured them in the same blue-green to completely hide where that splodge was. So I think overall it seems to have turned out okay. So if you do get a huge Copic boo-boo in one of your images, don't worry, there are ways around it. Don't throw all of your good work in the bin. And also, you know, at the end of the day, if there is a tiny little imperfection on your image, the recipient is still going to love it. It's still a card that you've coloured and taken the time and love to make for somebody personally. So, as a very famous card maker once said, it's handmade, not Hallmark. And I think that really does ring true. So now I'm just fussy cutting my bunny. And I'm using precision scissors for this. I have a specific pair of scissors just for fussy cutting. These are called the Copic scissors. I'll link them below if you're interested. I really like them because they're quite small, so you can get into all the smaller areas of the image. And they're very sharp as well. I just find them really precise for fussy cutting. And if you're not comfortable with fussy cutting, the top tips I would give you really are to just take your time, and also when you're cutting around the image, move the image rather than the scissors, and that really helps to get a more kind of precise line around your image. So to finish off, I have grabbed my trusty jelly roll pen again, and I'm just adding some white highlights in the areas where there would be shadows. So to add my highlights, I tend to do one long line followed by two small dots at the bottom. And I really just love the effect that that gives. I feel like it really kind of levels up your colouring game. So now that we've got the bunny all finished up, it's time to turn him into a card. And with Easter just around the corner, I've decided to make this into an Easter card for my niece. So what I'd like to do, I think, is use a big, bold sentiment to fill in the rest of the space on an A2 card. So I'm grabbing this Easter Wishes die, which is by Time for Tea Designs. And off screen, I've die cut that twice from white cardstock, and I am trimming it down to get rid of the wishes part of the sentiment, because I'm going to have my card say Happy Easter. So I'm just using the Easter part, and I am stacking the two die cuts together with liquid glue. The good thing about liquid glue is that obviously you get a little bit of wiggle room while the glue is still wet, so you can really make sure that the two die cuts are properly lined up. And then I'm going to take my stamp set from Mama Elephant. It's quite an old stamp set because, to be honest, I don't really make that many Easter cards, so I don't have that many Easter stamps to choose from. But actually, I'm only after the happy word from the set anyway to go with my Happy Easter. So I've grabbed some peacock cardstock from Concord and Ninth. I really, really love that shade of blue-green. And I have just dusted it with some anti-static powder. And then I have heat embossed the word happy with my Wow Bright White Superfine embossing powder, which I find is the best powder bar none for doing white sentiments. And I'm now trimming that down using my mini trimmer and the same scissors that I used earlier for the fussy cutting. I don't know about you, but I am such a perfectionist when it comes to things like that. If it's off by just like a hair's breadth, I have to trim it down so it looks level. So the next thing I'm doing is grabbing my Pink and Main rectangle dies to cut out the A2 background. And I'm going to pop that onto an A2 card base with some tape runner. Again, I'm going to link this tape runner in the description below because I've tried so many tape runners and this is by far the best. It goes on really easily, it doesn't get stuck, so you end up wasting half of a tape runner. It's the Easy Runner, I think it's called. I recommend it. So now that that's done, I've decided that I'm going to add a little bit of ink blending to the edge of my card just to give it a little bit more texture and interest. And again, of course, I'm going with those kind of blue-green shades to pick out the colour from the background digital paper. And I'm using Distress Oxides because I find, for me, they blend so smoothly. I find them the easiest thing to work with for ink blending. And I'm also using my blender brushes because I prefer those to blending foams in terms of getting a smoother transition. That's just what works for me. So again, I'll list the shades of Distress Oxide below, but I think I've used Peacock Feathers, Salvaged Patina and Speckled Egg. So just starting off with the darkest around the edges, blending into the Salvaged Patina, which is the middle shade, and then finishing off with the Speckled Egg on the inside. And I'm just doing that on the bottom left-hand corner, just for an extra element of kind of depth and interest. So now I'm adding a bit of liquid glue to my Easter sentiment. I'm popping that down towards the bottom of the card. And then I'm adding the happy sentiment on with a couple of foam dots. I do like to add a bit of dimension to the elements on my card. So I'm going to do the same thing with the bunny. Off screen, I'm just going to pop the foam squares on the back of him. And then I'm going to place him on top of the Easter sentiment. So that pretty much finishes up my card for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I know I've done a lot of talking, I'm so sorry, but if you've made it to the end, well done. And give me a like, drop me a comment, let me know how you're getting on with your Easter projects. And I have got plenty more videos to share with you over on my YouTube channel. So if you'd like to see those, there's a couple of links here at the end. But please do subscribe to my channel if you'd like to receive regular videos from me. And I'll see you all again soon. Bye!